Good afternoon, everyone.
Tana sawani le shega. Ina ngazul tseng ngone di do yo mare. Ina khazang go chu re de khazang angza nang she mo de do da ani. Chik dewa la de khane do chigan la ngazo. Dewa khane yu du lan ra. De do chigan la de shi do re. Ta ina tanda ngazo zo di ngazo tseng ngzo nang so de bang go chu re.
So then we are now joined by two new people, but then I would like to inform the people who have joined us now that we haven't actually begun to explore the text itself. In the sessions that we had so far, we were discussing about what actually is happiness and what are the causes of happiness and what are the true sources of happiness. Now from here onwards, we will discuss and explore the actual text itself.
아니 다 심바도 비자고라 아니 단나도 주주직 나로 연선어서도 말때스 컨트도 돼야 아니 이디지라 아니 트워트니라 안 그런데 내가 저 디트리샤 주디네 트워트니나래 대 많이 페게 난도 나라서 지시소 나라서 지도 버려 가려 나는 그런서 참아 직전함이부터는 참아 트는데
So then in this session we will try to explore as much as we can the actual text itself, and in the next session it's a question and answer session, so I encourage you all to ask any kind of question related to the text itself or any kind of general question or doubts that you have regarding Buddhist teachings in the question and answer sessions. Lesson.
다들 내가 저 다리 남존남 시에더라 남존남데 손이 디스르라나 아니 지로 무체라 아 다들 나지 조 넘버 손래 데다 카르라나 년중 샹세 양다베 타와선드레.
So then the text that we are going to study is called The Three Principal Aspects of the Path, and it is written by Jetsongkapa, and his full name is Jetsongkapa Losangchapa. And now, as the title it suggests, in the Buddhist path, we find it important to recognize and cultivate the three principal aspects of the path. And the three principal aspects of the path are first what we call renunciation, or simply a determination to be free from samsaric existence. And second, an awakening mind of complete enlightenment, what we call bodhicitta. And third, a correct view of the truth of emptiness or the wisdom of emptiness. So these are what we call the three principal aspects of the path. Thus.
코에기 동네래 아니 직타에 탄데 글로쳐라. 근데 근데 동네들에 면대비 글로쳐. 근데 아니 예번 중앙에 가라 치다 이 코에 동네 제가 나지 동네라 소바래. 근데 아니 동네들에 지 면대에 텔레 타비 탄데 글로쳐라. 아니 치나 인중래 내지라고라 치.
So the first of which is renunciation. It can be simply understood as that determination to be free from samsara or samsaric existence. So then in order for us to develop such a determination to be free from samsaric existence, we have to recognize the true nature of samsaric existence, which is that of suffering. And recognizing that samsara or our existence itself is beset and marked by suffering, then we can begin to develop a determination to be free of samsaric suffering. So that's the first of the three principal aspects of the path, a renunciation or a determination to be free from samsaric existence. Bless.
대타도 비대와디 말아. 근데 인사 되게 코아들래 아니 제가 나치기 동해들래 아니 먼저 가 대지고 가 대일치 지구선에 라메 버라. 근데 이게 다 코알 코디에데 먼저 레뉴기 샤마제 인자. 근데 신 코알 코디 그래서.
And then the question arises, why do we need to develop such a determination to be free from samsara? Or why do we need to develop such a renunciation in the first place? Then it comes from contemplating on the nature of suffering itself and our suffering and our existence. Then we begin to understand through contemplation that our existence itself is underlain by karma and afflictions. And as our existence itself is underlain by karma and afflictions, then our whole existence is always kind of marked and beset with suffering, interspersed with some moments of joy and temporary happiness. But the kind of joy and happiness that we experience in samsara is not what we call ultimate or true happiness. Thus.
당한도 레다 뉴몬기한게 아니 콜콜레데 이베는 뉴몬부터 가선 다잉아도 도에나 징라 아니 라지 마시와 치비 칠레치기 선중라데 뉴몬들와 테 뉴몬들레 아니 다잉아도 응게라 슈시바 나지 데샤샤다 티무 도저기 안게가도 아니 레 mambo m겨 mambo 지사 텐데 사와를 때는 댕이 바사와 때를 때는 아니 가도 콜레양 센스 코고드라 데뉴기 시마질레 데스.
So then when we say that our existence itself is underlain by karma and affliction, so herein karma can be understood simply as action, or more clearly karmic action. And why do we engage and accumulate such karma and such karmic action? Because our minds are always afflicted by disturbing emotions. And now, as we already discussed in the previous sessions, in Buddhism, we say that these disturbing emotions or afflictions are explained to be the mental factors that disturb the natural peace and calm of the mind. Now, as the afflictions and disturbing emotions takes hold of the mind, then our actions, our thought, our attitudes begin to be influenced by such afflictions, such disturbing emotions, as a result of which we begin to engage in and accumulate a lot of non-virtuous karmic actions.
텔레데 뉴몬사 펜나 가족다 뉴모딩 가족 펜나 쇼기니 저거다 보다 가족 뉴모게 생활 전도 되어라 근데 수수하마 원하다 지도니 시자신 나로라 가족 롱년데 세미연 바도 다다 진도는 버스야다 간지도 아주 디바 뭐 비싸려라 근데 아니 더 차셔나 dim dozo che te penata shedan ro da ngam chi khondra ya ro so bota tene mambu ji ngu do ra tesu samata mila ani chi ma chi wa che ani chi chadang gi ongi ani so se ma ji ya che ta tene du mi kar so chi khond mambu che lang ani chadang mambu ji che wa la tene le mambu sa wa ra ta dinde sa wa da nga zo ye ani khwa le dinde wi nge ba ju wa ina tesu gi ni mo chen tesu ngo su mi thoni tesu ba pa ya gi ta ji dang ra 다바 빵라디가 가서 지기 추누마 트셔도 다 데데기 마직 도도 렌셔 개마라 이만 가서 산나 땅땅도 땅데다 콘키랑 그 사마라라레.
So then when we understand this, that our actions are informed by these kind of afflictions and are affected by these kind of afflictions in the mind, then it is important for us to recognize this. And in order to recognize, we can simply ask ourselves the question, in the course of a day, from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed, then we are not really mindful of how much of our actions, speech, attitude, and thought are influenced by these afflictions. But if we take the time and be mindful to notice how much of our action, thoughts, and speech are influenced by afflictions, then you begin to realize that all these moments of frustration, all these moments of suffering, and so forth that you experience in the course of a day ultimately come from that disturbed aspect or disturbed state of the mind, which is a result of these afflictions arising in the mind. Now, as we recognize this, that our true suffering, our true suffering comes from the afflictions that arise in our mind, then now we need to develop a wish or an intention to be free to be free from such afflictions or to work towards abandoning and overcoming such afflictions in the mind. And that is the start of what we call developing the determination to be free from samsaric existence. And now, in order for us to overcome and abandon these afflictions in the mind, it is not something that these afflictions are not something that can be washed away, or these afflictions are not something that can be magically made to disappear. So, the only manner in which we can begin to overcome and abandon these afflictions in the mind is to start a process of transformation, wherein you always check your intention, you always check and become mindful of your thoughts, actions, and speech, and to see that these are not informed and affected by these afflictions, and then to always kind of contemplate on the negative effects of your actions, thoughts, and speech being informed and affected by these afflictions, such as ignorance, attachment, and anger.
That in the Penandation so that she qual a juice so chinijina. That the Susaraju Chen Cardo. Ane Pakandis Pango, Ra. The Pana Pendo Cardo, the Zuhako Chamba. The Zuhako with any, the Nigi Pana de Hakone, and tell us nearing sometime. Ra. Tambo di Pango Lachuma, Pango Junsekar, qual Cochudo, Ani Panga on the Panda Carre. Kisi di chena mantul chen karti ani dinde wi ba patu ne gese kar tu sama ta bi gone ani lani sta wene ti le la ra ta ji mi ji pangore la san chi bu.
So then now as we come to recognize the afflictions such as anger, ignorance, and attachment, and the way it disturbs the mind, and then how these disturbance manifests itself in our actions, behaviors, and so forth, then we realize that this is the true source of our suffering, these kind of afflictions, and the way that they manifest in our behavior and action. So this is very important to recognize, and what we mean by developing a determination to be free from samsara, in its essence, is that determination to be free from afflictions. And these afflictions are the cause of us taking birth in samsara again and again. Now, recognizing this, it is also important to contemplate on what is the purpose of recognizing the afflictions and their negative benefits. It is exactly to develop that conviction and determination to be free from samsaric existence. Thus.
Tapena ani susula taji chewdu galara mi susulo warta kashi pena ndecha chimbo kashi ani kondo da chimbo wa kashi yan timu ta tini de peji timu de dinje gi jalu le usorante ta pechen jishan mi kondo chimbo jela peshawa na ngela so chinju gala kondo mambo lanchi son depsi mambo tangde na hakona o da kondo le ngone ya bo mi do asan hakona ra ani dipanya la so tapshi tang wa ti ba pang la de la ta ti kondo di chemo di chen ya bo mi do ani di ngema ngala ende ne cheso mila ne ji ran la ne ji ti ya bo mi do san ta bullo de ji tini ya de gi chen ti de gala de gi kondo la sa de chen ti de gala ka tu je lo to mo sam ba ji bo mai ra na le de sang ra ga kondo chi sa ma re nge pang tu sa sa he pe gi le nyim bu ka tu ti de gala ti du nyim bu ta to ra chen ti de nyim bu ta tu na de mo ne ta ne ga zo ji da ma san ta ba jing tu ni ro che gi ra che sang zo nyum 제세기 시디 차고도 되디가라 아니 니모체 마진 카레 차토는 티야시 다 판단도 되니로시라.
So then, as we recognize the purpose of identifying the afflictions and the purpose of identifying the afflictions and the manner in which they manifest themselves in our behavior and action, then we also need a method to overcome such afflictions and to ultimately abandon these afflictions from ever arising in our mind stream. So now when we look at the example, the different kind of afflictions such as anger, attachment, ignorance, all the afflictions have an element of ignorance in them because ignorance permeates all kinds of affliction. Now let us look closely because human beings have different tendencies, different propensities, different inclinations, then the way that these afflictions manifest themselves in different people is very different in each context. But let's say that if there is a person who is liable to get angry very quickly, then he or she first has to recognize that it is the negative emotion that makes him behave and speak in such a manner. And then recognizing this, then he or she has to kind of realistically investigate the negative effects of such behavior, such speech. And when he or she does this, then he or she develops a wish or the intention to actually overcome and abandon this, recognizing that it is indeed not a sensible thing to do, that it is indeed not a beneficial thing. And now, just contemplating on this does not help because as even though we say that the afflictions themselves arise within our mind stream, but just developing that wish that okay, this is harmful for me, I'm going to abandon it, simply does not help. Uh, Simply does not help. Now the real challenge is, after contemplating and coming to a conviction that indeed anger is not beneficial for me, and then when you come into contact with someone who irritates you or angers you, then it is at that moment you need to cultivate your practice. It is in the face of adverse and challenging situations that you begin the practice of cultivating what we call the proper antidotes to the afflictions. So, in the case of anger, first you need to contemplate repeatedly on the negative effects of anger, and then practice it in your real life when you come into real life situations wherein you, you are liable to get irritated. You do not give into anger immediately, or you do not react immediately or retaliate immediately. Less.
근데 이제 답변은 나 공도 들리고 제가 아니 그는 도저히 안 돼. 지금 좀 동안 처분 되고 마치 조심해 봐. 근데 저희는 안디 까기 뭐 비슷해. 지단 가서 고에 밀어 고고로 사야 또 대사 근데 이제 고고로 때 엑셀에게 봐 지금 동안 첨부잖아. 동안 첨부 드레스 첨부잖아. 안디게 까기 되다. 근데 저기 참 비슷해. 지리도. 그저 가서야 근데 채터는 되게 밀어서 또 뜻을 하고 오지. 하고 저기 안에 가두거리 안에 님부터 도지라. 근데 아니 다 마리파이나 다가라. 마리파이 안게 가서 내가 노트 뭐 보지 지요. 그 사람 가르치려는 마리파. 제가 틴데 두 숨도 무슨도 이거네. 아니 먼저 미기 좀 들은 거 손에 들어가서 레하고 차. 그저라 님이 따상 고주순도 만디와지 하고는 아니 미기 좀 들은 틴나라시 손에 레하도다.
So then similarly, when we look at the affliction of attachment, which in its very gross form manifests itself in the form of us having so many desires without any sense of contentment. And this happens because attachment as an affliction or as a mental factor begins to exaggerate the appeal as well as the qualities of the object of our desires. And when we keep doing this, then there is no end to our desires and wants. So as a result of which, in order to acquire the object of our desire, then we begin to engage in many unethical unethical activities and selfish as well as very foolish behaviors, which ultimately becomes a source of suffering for us. And then similarly, ignorance. I think ignorance as an affliction and the way it could bring us suffering is kind of evident Because if we are not well informed and we have misguided intentions and so forth, then anything that we engage in do not really become fruitful and wholesome, and which ultimately is a source of suffering. Now, the reason that we need to recognize the afflictions is because in order for us to develop a sense of restraint in giving in to these afflictions, it is important for us to recognize that these afflictions are indeed not beneficial for us and harmful for us. So when you first develop such a conviction by contemplating and recognizing the negative effects of the afflictions, then you can work towards developing a code of conduct or an ethical means of approaching reality, such as adopting what we call the ethical restraint or ethical code of conduct of not engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions of the body, speech, and mind. Before you adopt such a code of conduct, it is important to recognize that all of these behaviors, speech, and thoughts manifest themselves because of the root afflictions. Yes.
따따뭐네 미기 주부 들음이라 미기 주디 갈라나다 그럼 대체 숨도시나 류글에는 넘버 숨이라 나기 넘버 시 이게 넘버 숨치디 아니 주샤오라.
So then, in order for us to develop the determination to be free from samsara, then, as we already said, it is important to first recognize the afflictions and their nature and how it affects us negatively. And after contemplating in this manner, we can now adopt a code of conduct for ourselves. And the simplest code of conduct that we can adopt for ourselves is not engaging in what we call the 10 non-virtuous actions. And we say that these 10 non-virtuous actions come from the three doors of body, speech, and mind. And they are 3 non-virtuous actions of the body, 4 non-virtuous speech, and finally 3 non-virtuous thought or intent. Yes.
답변나가서 류이는 나바송레 가스나라 디라 류는 즈 맞다 소치바 마진발렘바 아니 로임 라.
So to kind of enumerate these 10 non-virtuous actions, first through the first door of body, then there are 3 non-virtuous actions, namely killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. Yes.
아니 나 가스나나 제 트라마 치추 나치.
So from the door of speech, then the non-virtuous speeches are lying, divisive talk, harsh words, and finally gossip or idle talk. And finally, from the door of mind, then it is harmful intent, wrong views, and covetousness.
어디제 다 제가 딘데 가서 나서 되게 싫어 팀무슨라 아니 이미 있다 투는 단다 딘데 여기 집고 들어들어 시기면서 까야라 칼로다 조치기로 가서는 딘데 셔셔는 팀무한테 담비게 아니 미게 집고 들어는 소바게 아니 딘데 막가르 미게 레 몸비스타이다 룽아이레 드준 딘데 셔셔는 팀무슨라 이미 있다 투 딘데기 들아 들치기 가서 이번 중투나 아니 딘조이 레 마사야 미게 집기 레 마사야
So then, if we recognize that the reason that our existence in samsara is beset with suffering, or the causes of suffering, is because of the afflictions in our mind and how we give in to these afflictions, then the most effective and most simple manner in which we can overcome that is by adopting an ethical restraint of not engaging in these 10 non-virtuous actions of the body, speech, and mind. by becoming mindful that you never engage in actions, speech, and thought that are informed by these afflictions. And we would not now, at this point, we will not go into a detail of each of these 10 non-virtuous actions. But if we have the time later on, then maybe we can hope to explore them in greater detail. Yes.
대신 남지 주고 집이 조이지 남리래 지라 랑기 조스 집에 내바다 수된도 집이 대신 남지 주고 집이 조이지 남리래들 아니 샤주고 생샤.
So, rather than first going into the text in detail, I think it is important for us to have an idea about what exactly are the three principal aspects. So the first one is that determination to be free of samsaric existence, or renunciation. So up to this point, the discussion pertains to that particular aspect, renunciation or determination to be free. Now moving on, the second principal aspect of the path is what we call awakening mind of complete and perfect enlightenment, or bodhicitta in the original Sanskrit. So bodhicitta is technically defined as that altruistic intention or motivation that you develop to achieve perfect and complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings.
다 샹주고 셈라이데 카레션라 지랑아서 대바 제중 다니샤로 샤나 대바 첨부 주에게 대바 첨부네 추가 제들이야 샹주고 셈라지레고라 먼저 나한테 대바 첨부 인이라 오면 소소소 가리하고 해요 그라 대바 첨부 인레디 대바 첨부 레디 가서는 라니 지보면 신심전하지 상담다도 된대적으로 내가 변화다이나 랑게 조스 집에 내가다 총대를 좀 태제라지 주고 좀 조이지 남리 된대적으로 라잖아 제가 대지 생기래야 가지나 직 라니 지보 많이 신심전하지 있거든요 봐 대야 가르나 답변가 사제고도 사제와라 아니 사제리 가리치르지 우르는 건 미로 줘라 신심전하지 코알라 나데 랑게 마체만이 거 지자야마 된주삼 코알라 나데야디 대잉이야 코알네 대야기 지나 사제기 고만 타고 누워서 일러주고라 대고디가라니 코란 사제 타는데 일러요 이발에 타고비 진세드 가라니 이제 동행이 나와도 저도 거야 된대 일러지 봐
Yes. So herein, when we say bodhicitta, or the awakening mind of perfect and complete enlightenment, then it is exactly through such an awakening mind, or through such an altruistic intention, that one enters the Mahayana path of practice. So the Mahayana path of practice is generally known as the greater vehicle, or the greater path of practice, and it is called greater because, as we said, first you need to develop renunciation, or a determination to be free. Now, with regards to the motivation behind seeking liberation from samsara, then in the Mahayana path of practice, you need to generate such an altruistic intention that takes into account the welfare and benefit of all sentient beings, not only seeking liberation for yourself from samsara. And this is exactly the kind of intention with which all aspects of the path are informed in the Mahayana path of practice. Yes.
오늘 상주 생레데 레지나 디란지를 cewa 아니 가데지 ce고라나라 아니 센제단들레 니샤레스라 진데명아 된주고는 센지스다 다진양제고는 센지스 니샤레스
So then if we need to develop such an altruistic intention, such an awakening mind, then the classical texts instruct us that there are two methods to generate such an altruistic intention. One, through what we call the sort of gradual process of what we call the 7 precepts of causes and fruit, and another through the other method is through equalizing and exchanging the self for others.
다니 다신 냠지 거는 산치즈 걸라나 그나 라 대원 대원나지 신의 대원 대라 라 둥이 문제 받나지 신의 둥이 대 아니 집어지 춤바도 사나 따와이나 아니 라제 셴만 되기입니다 나야 보시는 거 가르치는 첼레 르탄 리입니다 라 디들로 도즈 빼게 첨보라 먼저 라탄다 디요 메비짱 소소 야보지 차잖아 파기 미디 가르치는 제 야미 다셔보라 된대위 다신 냠지 일로도 유스는 많이 이제 집어지장 코에 대어도 nga 대어도 코 등에 되면 nga 등에 되면 콜 집어 준 거는 nga 집어 준 거니 이제 집어지자르더라 근데 인자 아니 소소를 집으로 주는 코 여도 그 말이라 왜 집어라란디 로들려 티페든 조페 기점 아주 단다 디미 배wan기 아니 시도 나로라 직강이 몸이 세데 데데시 리라
So now when we look at the second method of generating such an altruistic intention through the process of exchanging and equalizing the self and others, then in that process it starts from a radical acceptance and recognition of the basic fact that all of us are similar in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. So when you come to a radical acceptance of this basic human fact, or this basic fact in existence, then as you totally accept and recognize this fact, then it helps us not to kind of selfishly pursue our own comfort, our own benefit at the expense of at the expense of other people's safety, at the expense of other people's happiness. And this is very important. And this comes from that radical acceptance of this basic human fact that all of us are similar at our core in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. So if you recognize this fact and all of your actions are informed by such an acceptance of this fact, then you are not prone or liable to kind of engage in behaviors and engage in actions that put other people's happiness and other people's safety at risk. Thus.
다지 냠질에 디로디 컨디 기침이 방한데 가서 시도 나로라 템 나로 여바 지부만 봐 먼저 다들 카이 시에버던 지만 다지 냠지 미비 쟁이 가서 가르쳐 강해 그라 배나 다티선 제컵 마젠 딘도 그라 디 가서는 소소소소 지부 다다들 좀 얘기 제컵도 야보 주나 하셔 심제래 미래 다 가르 지금 뭐 고유도 또저 가르 땅 주셔보라 디 소소 나를 대하고 받는 콜에 대하고 그래서 이걸로 치마도 안 치므로 아니 내가 듣는 디스소네 오 딘디치네 아니 최선이네 딘디 마투도 진주시네 내가라서 파츠 진주여로 시소소스 대사야 조지나래 지금 로나 모던 로나 지구자야 조지를 한지 뭔지 뭐부저라 그러라 또 참아 라제와 신파마 딘디 삼다데와 되네 아니 먼저 다시냐지 제마도 진지더라
So then when we look at this basic fact, then if we fail to recognize this basic fact, then it is the case that all the kind of strife, conflict, disagreement, and disharmony that we see and experience in this world come from a lack of recognition of this basic fact. Because even if we talk about like on a global scale conflict between countries, it comes from that basic lack of recognition that all human beings are the same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. We kind of deny or ignore this fact and engage and pursue acts and policies that actively harm and put other people in harm. So all manner of conflict, strife that we experience in this world comes from that lack of recognition of this basic fact. So we understand the importance of first coming to recognize this and radically coming to accept this radically and making sure that our intentions, actions are informed by our recognition and acceptance of this fact. So then, rather than kind of instructing you that, oh, this is the case, I think it's important for us to ask ourselves this question: is this indeed the case that all manner of strife, conflict, transgressions, and so forth come from this lack of recognition of this basic fact that we are all the same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering? Do you think this is the case, or do you have other ideas?
Yes or no?
Yes or no?
Dini mashe chu mai dini sang tang et peki chamra sang tang ani ngone gi pai de la ha khona ani su sem de ge ra ta bai chi bo nye dini de ta sana se jor no dini lu sa de la kora jan ngone di re de re mde ni she ju de la dema zen go yo marta mandi de gela di khare re de inji mara san dini to bole ne ge tu ra.
So then, this is very important when you approach spiritual instructions, that receiving and hearing spiritual instructions are important, but the most important task is to contemplate on these instructions that we receive. And we should not, you should not consider everything that I speak here to be valid, and something that you have to agree with. You should always, when you come here, as you listen to these teachings, it should not be the case that you let it in from one side and then let it out from the other side. It should be the case that you let it in, then make it kind of circle around in your head for a bit by contemplating on it, whether it is true or not. And then if you do not agree with some things and it doesn't appeal to you, doesn't meet the kind of scrutiny of your own logic and reasoning, then maybe let it out from the other side.
Junsan sawat dindiririsha ani pangoya dindiririsha langoya dindiririsha so ha kobitoni yang kanzu mission bala la ra tinga zu la chi bu mare di lawe na di gi mi di pagi la panang la juoi na ani kola dewa chite to da yang zu di jashar ta ya do ne kemba so so ya ko singe du ani ha ma go ni du la palang to che pe ki chimdra kanzu pe chu de hi jawala inji mi ta che de ne ko me na kemar ra so so lo ta zu 미제이나레 타와니네 참아 대원데 버도 동임도 지바인자 만즈 심제 슬파 팬토도나 디고르 지나종올라 지시네 레자로지 라니 파밀바 데기제 투나야 보라.
So this is very important in order for us to effectively discern between what we need to adopt and what we need to abandon, or what we need to cultivate and what we need to stop doing. Then it cannot come simply from instructions or listening to teachings. It should come from contemplation. And not only that, when we begin to contemplate, then our interactions with other people become more meaningful, because it comes from a thought-out process, and then you can share your perspective with other people. And this has a huge influence on other people, because it comes from a place of contemplation and rumination. And so this is in effect what spirituality is all about. It doesn't matter that you have to, it is not the case that you have to wear a certain robe, dress a certain way to pursue spirituality and practice spirituality. Spirituality means that you are effectively able to communicate your perspective on how to achieve true happiness with other people effectively.
Pena sozogi chigi migi chubola tsuruno soba ane sumode ani suzola dewa lewa na ani pena dana so dusha shena timusola ani Tezuki Godamala then Susula Jiwoda Debuda the New Yanu Sayan and Tezula ended the chains, Kanza and the Chinabodula, Yaboda, Penanga to me never Jelena, Suzuki Penanga Chamber and I'm here the Sanatown, and Chimba the me the pay about the generation than if Tonga dinner and me did it. Call a pench holder. Tana Jang Suzuki Pananga the Lizzie Kosunga, Dila Lechin Yamichin, and I'll enjoy those things with another kind of temas. The Nijlay, Mill, Tia Pendo.
So then, similarly, as we kind of recommend things to other people, for example, uh, there's a particular medicine or a particular tablet or pill that you yourself took and you felt that it works well, then you begin to recommend it to other people. So similarly, you cannot just base it on hearsay and kind of base it on some sort of intellectual conceptualization or intellectual kind of rumination alone to effectively talk about spirituality. You have to kind of cultivate these practices into your own life and to see if by adopting an ethical restraint in not engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions, by not giving into the afflictions, the three poisons in our mind stream, can you effectively can you begin to experience? Did you begin to experience more calm, more peace, more serenity, and more happiness in your life? Then, after experimenting it in this manner, if you found that this is the case, then you can begin to recommend it to other people that indeed, from my experience, through contemplation, through practice, this is the case.
Kiranzuki pay churches at the Injibin number in Guayama. Tanaka low in Donashi, Machera, Tirimato Injibinjiki, number the legend of Jama, some came Malena, Sungarazaka Nabi, Sanatana, common sense later, Tindojeda. So Ngalaji Governor Cola Golanti, Paisanki Chitura. Common sense meaning not in the Paila Kachinchi, and didn't Zanzanatuki did it, the Injibinji, Kuchugi, me Makane, Suzuki, Chickson, Joala, and
So then, in order for us to kind of to discuss and to cultivate such practices in our lives, one doesn't necessarily have to be a Buddhist. One doesn't necessarily have to be a Buddhist to receive these teachings, and one doesn't necessarily have to be a Buddhist to adopt these practices in our life. Because if we are talking about our own welfare and for our own benefit, then qualities such as happiness, compassion, and so forth are not intrinsically Buddhist in themselves. These are things that, as human beings, in our search for happiness, all these are things that we all need. It's just common sense that for our own welfare and for our own benefit, that these practices are helpful. So then the afflictions themselves are not a Buddhist invention. The afflictions, because all of us have a mind, then all of us, we get angry sometimes, we become attached to things sometimes. So then it doesn't matter like whether we call it a Buddhist teaching or not. It just makes sense, common sense, for us to recognize these afflictions as they are and then to work towards overcoming and abandoning these afflictions.
Piji Nambegi to Manche Lindo Chidwa, Ra, Tamosim Janaji, Mashiba, La Undugala, Mashi, letting us Jam Hashi Kenya when you do Ra. Ambachima, Jam Hashi Kenya, Mambo, Chulu, Inea, Kata Jam Hashika, legend in the kill. Some Janaji, Mashiba, Asrata, Tambajimanga, doing Shawana, Mashiba.
So then now the other method through which we generate such an altruistic intention of awakening mind, of complete enlightenment, is through what we call the 7 precepts of causes and fruit. Now in this method, I have to admit that it has a particularly Buddhist tinge to it, because it starts from recognizing all sentient beings as having been your mother. And this comes from the fact that in Buddhism we accept rebirth. And it's not just only Buddhists who accept who accepts rebirth. But in Buddhism, we say that we need, since time itself is beginningless, then all sentient beings have at one point served as our mothers. So we need to adopt an attitude towards sentient beings as having been our mothers. So the first of these 7 precepts of causes and fruit is recognizing all sentient beings as your mothers, or simply recognize your mothers. That's
tambu kharla na jinde menga dyendi kharre la waina ra ma shepa ten tenpa ten zowa yon shambara hinje hasam te chasa de
Tama di semjira. Yongi chambala di nyamdore la gida.
tera ma shepa ten tenpa ten zowa
Yonji chamba.
yon shamba
Ninje.
hinje hasam
Ani tama di semje. Debu di semjira.
debu semje.
So then the 7 precepts of causes are first recognizing your mothers, or recognizing sentient beings as your mothers. Then tangbo di mashiba dine tinsora. And then recognizing their kindness. The second is that you need to recognize the kindness that you have been shown by your mothers in your previous lives. And then third is repaying that kindness. And then the fourth is developing an attitude of love towards your mother, a heartwarming love towards your mother. And then the fifth is developing compassion. And sixth is developing what we call pure resolve, or high resolve, in order to alleviate the suffering of all your mothers. And the seventh is the fruit, or the result of such gradual process of contemplation, which is that generation of altruistic intention itself.
Jinde menga deju gone semchi le ta ga shanchu sen le ni do a je nyan jo gone se jinde menga deju gone se chi ra kesa lam zo no so de la ta ngin ju do sa shang se do ta yang te be ta wala ti ta to ni to bi shire do shira mo de ni shi ta de ya pa shu shum to ni le de pe ka sha wala ne pe ta bu ra ti ji lang do ra.
So this is the manner in which we can awaken an altruistic intention, or bodhicitta, through these 2 methods, by the 7 precepts of causes and fruit, and the other method is through equalizing and exchanging the self for others. And now the third principal aspect of the path is the correct view of emptiness, or the correct view of reality itself. Now, in this discussion, it gets particularly difficult, emptiness as a topic to discuss. I think we will kind of have a more extensive discussion when we actually explore the text itself. Yes. So then, as you have come here to Thesamling, and then as you kind of talk about your experience in Thesamling later on, and then then of course you will begin to share that I went to Thesamling and then I studied the 3 principal aspects of the path. And then if you're not able to recognize the 3 principal aspects of the path themselves, then it would not be a fruitful discussion. So that's why before we study the text itself, it is important to recognize and identify the 3 principal aspects themselves. So as a way of getting ourselves to better recognize and identify the 3 principal aspects of the path, I am asking you all again, what are the three principal aspects of the path? Everyone can maybe answer it together.
Wisdom of emptiness?
Correct view of emptiness, wisdom of same. That is.
다디도 아니 간저 배는 인중을 반도라. 인중을 반도도 돼 가르쳐서라. 다 코알에 이번 주원에라. 아니 그만도 코알에 코야기 주니도 가르르.
So then, in our discussion about the first principal aspect, renunciation, then we say that renunciation is that determination to be free from samsaric suffering or suffering itself. So then, what are the two causes of us taking uncontrollable birth again in samsaric suffering? Leda nyomoris.
Leda nyomo. Ra. Kalasa again. How's that? Would you have? Yeah.
I would say ignorance.
Leda nyomo.
The
Karma and
mogi marik bare lagyor. Sawada rada.
Nyomo ladi sunjayara. Desha shena timu sunjayara. Ti sunjayara.
So yes, at the root of samsaric existence is of course ignorance, but ignorance manifests itself in all other forms of affliction and actions.
Le nyomo age ani ngaje anje kwala kwadira. Tindeje ani 당어도 다진냠제기 생지 줄러서 티 컨트롤 셰션서 지킬라더라 다진냠제는 컨트롤 산다.
Okay, then we discussed that in order to generate that awakening mind of bodhicitta or awakening mind of complete enlightenment, then we can generate such a mind through one of two methods, and one of the methods was through that process of equalizing and exchanging the self for others. How do you understand that method? What exactly do we mean by equalizing and exchanging the self for others?
That would be Tonglen.
Tonglen resti.
Tonglen ne. Tonglen che ani shamba.
Radical acceptance that all human beings have the right to be happy and accepting them as they are, and not not inflicting any kind of harm to them.
Tilagit misangmayora the draw malane misangmayora dewa debare dunya me deware dikhellengores dikhellen nasra ani mila yeje chigi mares mila yeje machenasra ani mila ani hakoshindu ani dukbuda narjudin tang mares.
제가 다진냠제 글로라이더라 많이 집어이 막 sama 집어 있으나 밀어넣지 말아. 제가 단단한 또 인기를 셔 마투데 뭐버제데 가르 다진냠제 글로 메비 왕기 나타면 디서 셴바선은 마당하게 된일이 오라.
So yes, now when we say that we can generate such an altruistic intention by equalizing the self, equalizing and exchanging the self with others, it is to develop an attitude of equanimity wherein we do not create distinctions and distances between ourselves and others. We look at everyone with the same loving compassion. And now, as we recognize this, then we recognize that in our discussion, we gave the example of all these conflicts, strife, disagreements, and disharmony coming from that basic lack of recognition of this very basic human fact. So then we also went on to discuss about the 10 non-virtuous actions. So we talked about there being 3 non-virtuous actions of the body. So can anyone list them out?
Killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct.
Takes.
딩가도 칼라네 때좀 점점 안데 치고더라. 그래서 zamdo chichen chiran so tidi no si re ra zamdo te sembala masha se anzu mambo inji mi do ma dro kan do di ya bo nge to ne ya boda ani ta ti che li jin na na gi number shi ra na gi number shi de ta simba ji gi so da da di so
So I find it important that we need to kind of ask ourselves and remind ourselves, or kind of do a little bit of a revision of the discussion from time to time, because it not only serves us to kind of be more mindful, but also it serves us, like you might take a lot of note down, but it might be the case that sometimes you kind of note down something completely wrong, but it helps us in both of these ways. And now, if someone else could answer the next question, someone who hasn't spoken so far, what are the 4 non-virtuous forms of speech?
Harsh speech,
yeah
divisive
yeah
speech, idle talk, lying.
Jigs.
chisan chi gi lawa ina simba sama ko tensu te ro anzu te che okay ni da le la nga yi number sun ro sun du ka su la na di
Okay, so then the last question, what are the 3 non-virtuous actions of the mind, or 3 non-virtuous thoughts?
It is wrong views, harmful intents, and the other word, I don't know what it means.
Covetousness.
Maybe someone can explain it because in Spanish,
Wanting something that other has. Wanting something of the others that belongs to others. Coveting.
okay. How we say that again?
Covetousness. Covetous. Being greedy.
chisan anzu churu la de tin ra pa chu chi xin chi la ra anzu thot na chiran la zam zam tensu ta ya anzu pen to sa ra tin de che ne ha ta anzu dine ta anzu ngi shang chu sen le ra shang chu sen la de la shang chu sen che dang de la ha zu du
konsul chere. Ti dosara ngone konsul dakshin nyamje la edila.
da ne de mari shang chu sen da jin yang je dang tu ya ji de me nga de ni se chi ni sha ra ta di mala na di ra jin de me nga de kha ra
So then another question then, what are the 7 precepts of causes and fruit?
mene ke me ki yan je sung da ra
Great. So maybe I will repeat it. The 7 precepts of causes and fruit are: first, recognizing sentient beings as your mother, or simply recognizing your mothers; and second, recognizing their kindness; third, repaying their kindness; and fourth, developing an attitude of heartwarming love towards your mothers; and then the fifth is developing compassion, and the sixth is developing a pure resolve to alleviate their sufferings, and the seventh is the result itself, that altruistic intention, generation of altruistic intention.
zam da chiran zo di tiya mara na yang zo le ke shi ti de ni ra di ni je ka jin zam da shi ga ma shi tiya mara de ra an chu ze gu ma na zo ki ju ni pe wa re zo ba chen bu de ya ne de ra ani pa gi le chang la ma zo yi ma yang di su ko pa do chi lo na ya ha gu ma ra da di ka du ga nga di tiya cha sa tiya tu tu ma zo le ke ji tiya ra
So then, if you have trouble noting down the kind of different things that are being discussed, then you can always let us know that you need more time to note them down, and the translator is patient enough to repeat repeat these things.
Others may say maybe half, then you will not understand what is. Okay, tanda nga ta chai du chu shira.
Okay, so we stop here and break for tea, and gather again in half an hour.